Okay, I close this down.
Yeah, it's done.
Thank you, Barry. Thanks a lot for having me here. I would echo Glenroy's comments there that it's always exciting to get back in front of up-and-coming coaches and people who have the same passion as you. Coming from Western Canada, my background is a redneck Albertan, born and raised. I always try to put the disclaimer in there that if something falls out of my mouth and you wonder if I said that, then I actually did say that. And the disclaimer already is that I'm sorry if I offended you right now, so that I don't have to apologize as I go through my discussion. But I'm just going to talk a little bit, same type of pattern, but maybe in a different way. I think my journey, there's 3 or 4 real key things that have influenced me or helped me get the opportunities I've had. One is the environment. So the choices people around me made, starting with my parents. Both came from farms, both were small town people. We grew up in a small town. But where they chose to live, we could walk to the pool, we could walk to the rink, we could walk to the ball diamonds, we could walk to school, we could come home at lunchtime. All of those types of things, looking back, were opportunities that I see a lot of kids don't get, including my siblings, kids, my nieces and nephews. There never was an opportunity that we couldn't pursue. The only rule was if we chose to do it, we had to follow through. And I remember one year that I thought I wanted to take piano lessons. And for those of you who know me, seeing me at a piano would be, a visual you probably don't want to have. While 3 or 4 less, times into the lessons, it was obvious that piano wasn't for me. And I decided I wanted to quit. Well, that wasn't going to happen. The message to me was, you wanted to do this, you will see it through until the end. And looking back on everything, obviously that stuck with me for a long time. As a kid, as I said, my family, both my parents came from farms. We lived a couple hours away from their home places, if you would. And every Friday we would load up the station wagon and we would head to the farm. And we would work from the time our feet hit the ground till Sunday night when we drove back. And then Mom and Dad would go to work and we'd go to school, and we'd repeat again in a lot of cases, especially around seeding time or harvest time. I used to spend Easter holidays there and calving season. So hard work, the little things, the things you learn that if you don't tighten that bolt far enough, something major happens. If you don't go out and check that cow when she might be calving, that calf could die. All those little things sort of become ingrained in what you do, and the values and the things you put into where you're going. When I grew up in Alberta, it was a great time as a sport person. We had Hockey Alberta was a phenomenal organization to grow up in, and again, it wasn't until years later that I realized that women weren't supposed to be in hockey. And when I listened to my peers and I listened to the people around me tell me the challenges they had in Ontario or other provinces, and I was like, oh really? Well, I don't have any of that, and I didn't. But I didn't appreciate the people around me and how they protected me and how they looked after me. And especially, I will be hard on the men a lot, but women, I'll be hard on you as well throughout this talk. But the men around me as I grew up, I started coaching when I was in grade 8 because girls didn't play hockey, and I played 1 year. And I don't know, I must not have pushed it, which is uncharacteristic of me, not to be stubborn or push something. I must not have pushed it in one capacity or another, because I never played again after that. But in grade 8, I don't know what happened. I don't know whether the parents coaching my brother's team got tired of seeing my face up against the plexiglass, or if one day I just stepped on the ice, or how I got on that ice in that practice, but I got there, and I never left. And they probably were too nice of men to tell me to get off the ice. So I ended up coaching him right through till I graduated and left Oyen, which is where I grew up, a town of 1,000 people. And through that, the fathers, the people around me, looking back, they protected me. And that continued on in my time through Hockey Alberta. I was given opportunities on the male side and the female side. And continued to work through a lot of pieces there. became a recreation director in a small town in Castor, and again, had a rec board of men that for whatever reason looked out for me and helped me. And as I begin my journey nationally, they recognized that the small town I was in, the level of hockey wasn't good enough. And one day one of them walked in and said, what if you could go to Stettler, which was 45 minutes down the road, and coach Junior B? I was like, Junior B men? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, they got coaches, why would I go there? Yeah, but what if you went and you were an assistant coach with them? I was like, well, sure, I'll try it, whatever. And I went, and it was interesting. It was awkward at the front end. You could tell that a few favors had been called in to get me on that staff and to give me that opportunity. But it was another step, and it was something I didn't even know I needed, and somebody had created for me. And I think the one thing that I'm proud of over my whole career is I always took advantage of opportunities, and that was an opportunity. And whether it was that or whether it was volunteering, my parents are heavy into volunteering. If there's Meals on Wheels, if there's a ball diamond to be built, if there's a farmer's market and somebody has to sell lunch, that's where you'll find them. It doesn't matter if it's the one day of the year you get to come home to see them. You have to go to the farmer's market, or I call it show and tell. I have to go with them so they can show me and tell about me. But I go with them, and that's ingrained in me. And then I started coaching softball. My first year out of university, I came home and I walked up to the arena with my mom to register my sister in ball. And the people in registration, as some of you would know in small towns, that's how you get your coaches sometimes. They asked my mom if she wanted to coach my sister's team, and my mom pointed at me. First she said, no, I won't, but she will. And I looked at her, and I started coaching my sister's group in ball when they were in grade 6, and I took them right through. We kept that team together for 8 years, and there was only 7 of them. And every year they'd go and find 3 more, and they'd pull them out of somewhere. I remember my cousin played first for years. She couldn't run. She had a bad hip, but she just played first and scooped them out, and she'd just get little hits to first base, and we'd put a pinch runner in for her, and away we'd go. But they kept that team going for 8 years just in that capacity, and I have such a great relationship with all of those women now, and they're very successful. Chiropractors, doctors, dentists. It's amazing where they've gone from that little group. The big thing for me is I did a lot of sports. If you played it, you coached it in a small town. And individual sports, team sports, you learn so much about teaching people. I coached swimming, and I loved it because you had all these kids over here who just wanted to have fun and swim laps and then have their juice and whatever over here and their snacks. You had these 1 or 2 that wanted to go after it. They wanted to know about sports psych. They wanted to know about training. They wanted to know about nutrition. And you could really take care of both sides and not have to feel divided. Then you go to a team sport, and you've got, in our sport right now, we have 23 athletes and 23 different agendas. And 23 of whatever they want to pursue, whether it's excellence, as Glenroy referred to, or whether it's just to be with their buddies, whatever it might be. And I think having gone through all that with a variety of sports, you learned a lot. I learned a lot about working with people and especially individuals, and how you get the best out of them, and how that gave me experience that you can never underestimate. So that was a big piece for me. The timing of people coming into my life, Glenroy referred to his first coach. Growing up in a small town, I never knew what was outside those doors. I never knew what the opportunities were. In grade 8, we had, I talked about getting involved in coaching, but we also had some teachers move in that were highly instrumental in terms of shaping me and developing my attitude towards sport, and they were in volleyball and basketball. And then as I moved along, it continued, and we had people move in, and as people moved in and they were passionate about badminton, or they were passionate about tennis, or whatever it might be, we started to play those sports, and you started to learn about them and be a part of them. And it was amazing how just one person coming in being passionate about something could change the direction you would go. And I'm so fortunate in terms of growing up in that environment and getting those opportunities. The Winter Games, Summer Games have always been a part of my life. Women's hockey was accepted into the Canada Winter Games for 1991. It was 1989, I think, or 87, right in that time frame is when it was announced. And I literally am that story, two roads diverged, and I took the one less traveled. At that point in time when they were accepted, I was going down a softball route. Ball, I was working with Team Alberta in ball, and I was going down that route, and was going to go to the, I think it was the Western Canada Summer Games as a coach, and that summer, I wanted to see what hockey had. I'd done hockey all my life as a coach. They were at the same time, softball and hockey, the camps, the tryout camps, and I had to pick. And I still, to this day, do not know why I picked hockey, because softball and swimming I like far better than hockey. So it was interesting at our summer camp in August, we were talking one night and talking about favorite sports, and they got to me and they were like, well, we know your favorite sport. I said, I don't think you do. And I started going through it, and they were like, I got to 2, and I might have had a third. I think badminton was my third. And they were like, do you even like hockey? Like, and they were just amazed by the fact that if I could change it and do the same thing I'm doing right now, it wouldn't be in hockey. But I did. I went down the hockey path, and it's been phenomenal in terms of the opportunities I got. In '91, I went to those games as a fourth coach, paid my own way. And again, opportunities and experiences, you can't wait for people to hand them to you. You figure out how you can make it work. And I remember that winter, I taught skating lessons in 4 different communities, and just every night, every weekend I was doing stuff so that I could pay my way to go to the Canada Games. And I did all the pre-scouting there for Team Alberta. And they won a gold medal. They beat Ontario out for the first time. Ontario never gets beat in women's hockey if you follow us at all. 95, I was the head coach, and that was a freaking disaster. You come off of games where a team won a gold medal and you're the next coach. Like if the sport you're coaching won a gold medal before you, look out, because what happens next is a challenge. But what you learn is so incredible. As a rec director, I was part of regional games hosting. I coached in summer games in softball and volleyball, and I coached curling in the winter games. And the things you learn about professionalism and how you conduct yourself, and all of the people around you, and how you're part of something bigger than just your sport. You're part of a province. You're part of a pile of people that are all working towards something is phenomenal. My first Olympics was in 2002, and I remember walking into the Salt Lake Village. And as you might remember, although we're starting to get to the age, some of us, where some of you are too young to remember this, 2001 was really a world-changing year when the 9/11 happened, and a lot of things changed in our world, and it wasn't any different in the Olympics. When you went into the village, there were so many different things there, but the 2 things I remember is that the U.S. Dorms, or where they stayed, had no flags on it. You couldn't tell where the U.S. residence was. And the second thing I remember thinking was, this is so disappointing. It's just like the Canada Winter Games. It's like there's cafeteria, like the only difference is there's no APCO trailers. We actually got buildings, But it was interesting how everything had come together in that, yeah, it was exciting, and don't get me wrong, I was excited, but that initial thought was like, wow, this is the same as everything else that I've done. And it really was, looking back over time, all of my experiences through the province and the regional games, everything I had done right up to it had prepared me to walk in there and not be overwhelmed and not get caught in the moment and be able to do my job as an assistant coach. 06 and 10 Olympics and the 2014 I was the GM of our program. I think the biggest message there is it doesn't matter how many times you've been to a major games, or you've been to a provincial tournament, or you've been to a playoff tournament. Every story is different. Every team brings a new story. Every athlete brings a new page to it, and it's never the same. You pull out some good pieces, and you pull out what might have worked then, but you have to really keep an open mind the fact that you have different athletes, you might have a different coaching staff, you might have, it's in a different environment, and you can never use a cookie cutter approach. It's completely different every time, and those 4 Olympics, I could do a 1-hour talk on each of them in terms of the lessons learned there and how different they were. I think sorry, I'm just looking back at my notes here. The one thing I would say too, when we come from Western Canada, at times we take on, I feel like every province has a different identity, but we kind of, as Western Canada, at times we take on a small town mentality. Well, we're never going to be better than that. We're never going to go there. And I had convinced myself as a young person that, you know, growing up in a small town, one of the things why I wanted to coach was that for kids that came after me, they would know better what was out there. They would know the opportunities. They wouldn't miss deadlines to register for events. They wouldn't miss opportunities where they could maximize their potential and see how far they could go. And I always felt like there was something else. I was missing something, and because I was a small town, or from a smaller center, I was at a disadvantage. And in 1996, I took a year off from my job as a recreation director and went to the NCI in Calgary, and had the opportunity to be mentored by Tom Rennie and Mike Johnson. And ironically, Tom is my boss now. And that was a real interesting time in my life. These were people, as I talked about growing up in Alberta, there were so many great men around. Those two, Wayne Fleming, Wally Kozak, Dave King. We had so many great hockey guys in Alberta. So here I was coming out, I was going to be mentored by these two. I was going to work with the men's national team program. And what a great year it was going to be. Oh yeah, it was going to cost me $50,000, and I made the decision before I asked my parents if they would help me out. So that was an obstacle I had to tackle first. But again, I go back to my parents and the fact that they, you know, I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money at all, not by any means, but we never had to worry about whether they would support us or help us out on those opportunities. I never thought about how much it was going to cost me. I just knew my parents and I would figure it out. And they never got what I was doing until 2002, when they all came to Salt Lake. And I think it was at that point in time they realized that coaching might be a job, and I actually might be able to make a living out of it. But anyway, going back to the small town, I'm going to the NCI. I go to the first meeting with Tom Rennie and Mike Johnson, and it was so disappointing. They for sure didn't want me there. They didn't want a woman there. They didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know how to handle me. I had a counterpart, Jim Curry, who was a family man. He had 2 or 3 kids. He'd taken a year off his job, and they put his whole family at a disadvantage to get this experience. And they were treating us the same. So they weren't going to let me on the ice, and so they weren't going to let Jim on the ice. And it was really obvious that it was because of me that Jim couldn't go on the ice. So I met with Tom and Mike after, and I said, look, if the reason that you're not letting Jim on the ice is because of me, then that's not fair to him. Like, you need to let him on the ice, and we need to sort out the problem between the 3 of us. So the next day, Jim was on the ice, and I was in the press box reading the Calgary Sun and drinking Tim Hortons coffee. And that went on for the whole season. But at the end of the year, you know, Tom and I had a bit of a chat, and since then he's been one of the biggest fans of women's hockey, and it's great to have him as my leader in Hockey Canada, and there couldn't be a better supporter of women's hockey. So at times you have to bite that bullet for the others that come after you, and you have to set that environment so that it can be better for those around you. I did get to sit in on all the practice plans though, and the biggest disappointment, the second disappointment I had was there was no magic drill book. When they were preparing those practices and when they were talking about them, it was the same as what I had done in Oyen, as what I had done with other coaching staffs. There's new ideas and things, but I really had gone into that environment thinking I was going to get this magic drill book. And away I was going to go with this magic drill book. And what an eye-opening experience that was for sure on that end. I've been fortunate. Our athletes are second to none. I always say internally I just want to throttle them, but externally I would have nobody else out there representing us. They are terrific ambassadors for the game. They recognize the responsibility they have to grow the game. They're committed to excellence. They're committed to delivering gold medals to Canada. And it's always a treat to coach them on most days. But the most fun I have now is the athletes I coached are now starting to move into coaching. So just a great example of this is last night I get a text. Jillian Apps, I don't know if many of you know Jillian, she just got hired by Boston College as an assistant coach. And when I coached them, I used to have a phrase that from our blue line to the tops of the circles and from their blue line to the tops of the circles, I called it the shit your pants zone. Because if you turn the puck over in that zone, you better be shitting your pants when you come back to the bench and have to deal with it. So that was, and they hated it. And to this day, they still bring it up. So this is what she says to me. Well, in my first NCAA game as a coach, I now know why you harped on us so much about not giving the puck away at either blue line. The shit your pants zone has now been incorporated into Boston College. Those are the great moments. Those are the times when it's so exciting to see where they're at and what a difference maybe you've made in their lives. It continually happens, and the last thing I'd leave you with is we just hosted a High Performance One coaching course in May, all female, all former or current players, and what a phenomenal time that was in May. 33 of our players, from the ones who just played, Marie-Philippe Poulin, right up to Cassie Campbell, all in the same room, all of our generations, and their passion and their understanding. And the funnest part of that was I did player evaluation and selection, and when I was done, they were like, that's it? So that's all there is? That's all you do? Yeah. I'm like, you are not the center of our universe every night. We do this and we're done with you. And it was so shocking to them all the way through. The final thing I would leave you with is that as you go on, and whether you're coaching your club teams, the Canada Summer Games is a phenomenal opportunity. Coaching it in your home province is a whole different story. Having done it in Vancouver and done numerous things in Alberta, but your preparation is key. And your preparation probably should have started months ago, but it should start from this weekend for sure. I have a saying that I always use, that under pressure your performance will sink or rise to the level of your preparation. And that's right on you as coaches and as leaders. And the final piece I would say is the leader should never be surprised by an audible. So a major games takes on a whole life of its own. It doesn't matter, like Glenroy I'm sure has heard it, Alex heard it, anybody's been to the Olympics, like something happens and the phrase is always, well, it's the Olympics. Anything can happen there. When an event starts, there's no more planning or prep that can be done. Once it starts, you're either in performance mode or you're in survival mode. Which one it is, that's in your control, and it's in your control right now. It's not in your control when that opening ceremony starts. And it's up to you to activate whichever one you want to be in. So if you're a procrastinator, I would say that you put that in your professional development plan, that you want to change that right now. But once you start that event, you are not going to be doing any more planning or prep. You're just going to be in survival mode. And if you've done everything you need to do, then that means your athletes will perform on demand. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to the rest of the day.